The Eleusinian Mysteries were secret initiation rites near Athens honoring Demeter and Persephone. They unfolded in two phases: the Lesser Mysteries, spring purification, and the Greater Mysteries, autumn initiation. Candidates, called maistai, first underwent ritual cleansing and pledged a binding oath of secrecy. A public procession then carried sacred objects, hieria, from Eleusis to Athens and back, symbolizing Persephone's descent and return. Initiates drank a ceremonial barley-based potion known as kykeon, tied to Demeter's myth and agricultural renewal. The central experience took place in the telesterion, a large initiation hall where dramatic revelations, deignomena, legomena, dromena, things shown, said, and performed, conveyed the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Symbolic darkness and sudden light represented the return from the underworld. The mysteries promised a more hopeful afterlife and moral transformation without revealing doctrinal dogma. Their power rested on controlled secrecy, shared ordeal, and myth enacted as lived experience. The Mithraic rites formed the core of the Roman mystery religion devoted to Mithras, a Persian-inspired god of light and cosmic order. These secret ceremonies were conducted in underground temples called Mithraea, symbolizing the cave where Mithras slew the cosmic bull, a myth known as the Tauroctony. Initiates advanced through 7 hierarchical grades: Corax, Nymphus, Miles, Leo, Perses, Heliodromus, and Pater, each linked to a planet and representing spiritual ascension through the cosmos. The initiation involved symbolic trials of fire, water, and darkness, testing moral and physical endurance. Ritual meals reenacted Mithras's divine feast with Sol, the sun god, where initiates shared bread and wine as sacred symbols of unity and strength. The entire ceremony mirrored the soul's journey from material entrapment to celestial rebirth, emphasizing discipline, loyalty, and courage. Mithraism's secrecy and military appeal made it a powerful underground faith, until Christianity replaced it in the late Roman Empire. The Ordo Templi Orientis, or O.T.O., was founded in the early 20th century and became closely associated with Aleister Crowley, who merged esoteric Freemasonry, Thelema, and Tantric principles into its core teachings. Its most secret and controversial practices centered on sex magic, the belief that sexual energy could be harnessed as a sacred force to achieve spiritual illumination or manifest will. Rituals involved symbolic unions, sometimes literal, sometimes purely meditative, between male and female participants representing divine polarities. During these acts, the energy produced was directed through visualization, sigils, or invocation to charge a specific intent. The bodily fluids, seen as carriers of life essence, were sometimes preserved or consumed as part of the ritual's symbolic completion. Crowley described these practices in texts such as Liber Agape and Liber Riftein, the Gnostic Mass, framing them not as indulgence, but as alchemical transformation, uniting the physical and divine through deliberate, conscious will. The Goetia refers to the first section of the Lesser Key of Solomon, a 17th-century grimoire that catalogues 72 demons said to have been bound by King Solomon using a magical seal. Practitioners of Goetic magic aim to summon and command these entities through a series of strict ceremonial steps. The magician first creates a protective circle and triangle, inscribed with divine names and symbols to contain the summoned spirit. Incantations written in Latin and Hebrew invoke specific demons, each associated with powers such as wealth, knowledge, or influence. Essential tools include a wand, brass vessel, sigils, and a pentacle representing Solomon's authority. The summoner must maintain absolute control, commanding the spirit to appear visibly or audibly and to obey specific instructions before being formally dismissed. Any deviation from protocol was believed to invite possession or physical harm, making Goetia one of the most feared and complex ritual systems in Western occultism. The Black Mass is a ritual deliberately designed to invert the Christian Catholic Mass, serving as both blasphemy and rebellion against ecclesiastical authority. Its origins trace back to medieval accusations against heretics and later resurfaced during the witch trials and in 19th century occult revivals. Central to the ceremony is the parody of sacred elements: inverted crosses, prayers recited backward, and desecrated communion hosts. The altar is sometimes replaced with a nude participant symbolizing profaned purity, and invocations call upon infernal forces instead of the Holy Trinity. The ritual's purpose was not only shock, but to embody spiritual opposition, turning reverence into defiance, sanctity into sensuality, and submission into willful independence. In some variations, animal blood or symbolic sacrifices were offered to represent rejection of divine law. Historically exaggerated by moral panics, the Black Mass nevertheless influenced modern satanic and counter-religious movements, cementing its reputation as the archetype of forbidden worship. Petro ceremonies form the darker, more aggressive branch of Haitian Vodou, contrasting with the peaceful Rada rites. Originating from the fusion of African spiritualism and the trauma of slavery in the Caribbean, Petro rituals channel fiery spirits known as Eleusinian of the Petro nation. These entities are invoked to bring protection, vengeance, or transformation, purposes often rooted in survival and resistance. Ceremonies typically take place at night within a peristyle, temple, where drums beat in rapid syncopation to summon spirits such as Izili-Dantor or Ogun. Participants enter trance states, allowing possession by the LWA, who speak or act through them. Offerings of rum, peppers, animal sacrifice, and fire play key symbolic roles, representing purification and raw power. The ritual's intensity, dancing, flames, and possession, reflects a channeling of repressed suffering into spiritual force. Petro ceremonies remain misunderstood, often mislabeled as black magic, though their origins lie in liberation and ancestral justice. The cult of Dionysus, rooted in ancient Greece, celebrated the god of wine, ecstasy, and transformation through highly secretive rites known as the Dionysian Mysteries. These rituals were conducted in secluded groves or mountains, far from cities, emphasizing release from social order and connection to primal nature. Participants, mostly women known as maenads, entered states of ecstatic frenzy through rhythmic drumming, dancing, and the consumption of wine, believed to embody Dionysus himself. Symbolically, this intoxication dissolved personal boundaries, allowing communion with the divine and temporary transcendence of human limitations. Central acts often included the sparagmos, ritual tearing of an animal, and omophagia, consuming raw flesh, representing death and rebirth within nature's cycle. These ceremonies sought spiritual liberation through chaos, reversing societal restraint and celebrating instinct. Despite their religious depth, outsiders saw them as dangerous and immoral, and their mystery elements were suppressed as Christianity spread through the ancient Mediterranean world. The Aghori sect of India, a small offshoot of Shaivism, is known for its extreme ascetic and taboo-breaking rituals meant to achieve spiritual enlightenment by transcending all dualities, pure and impure, holy and unholy. Central to their practice is the belief that everything in existence is a manifestation of Shiva, even death and decay. Some Aghoris meditate in cremation grounds, smear themselves with human ashes, and use skulls as bowls, symbolizing detachment from material identity. Cannibalistic acts, consuming small portions of human flesh found near cremation sites, are not performed out of desire, but to confront fear and dissolve the illusion of separateness from death. These rites are accompanied by mantras and offerings to deities like Kali and Bhairava, gods of destruction and transformation. To outsiders, such practices seem horrific, but for initiates, they represent the ultimate acceptance of life's totality and the destruction of ego through radical devotion. The Saturnalia was an ancient Roman festival honoring Saturn, the god of agriculture and time, celebrated each December. What made it forbidden in later Christianized eras were its complete reversals of social order and morality. During Saturnalia, slaves dined as equals, or even as masters, while the wealthy served them. Public gambling, drunkenness, and open sexual expression replaced rigid Roman discipline. Citizens wore colorful garments instead of togas, and even laws were temporarily suspended. Symbolically, this period of chaos represented the mythical Golden Age of Saturn, a time before hierarchy and repression. In private rituals, effigies or mock sacrifices were sometimes made to Saturn, reinforcing the theme of death and rebirth tied to winter's darkness. After Rome's conversion to Christianity, elements of Saturnalia were absorbed into later winter festivals, but its uninhibited spirit and social inversions were condemned as pagan and subversive to the moral structure of the empire. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in 1888 in London, was one of the most influential Western occult societies, blending Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, and ceremonial magic into a structured spiritual system. Its rituals were based on the progression of initiatory grades, each representing deeper mastery over symbolic elements: earth, air, water, fire, and spirit. Ceremonies were conducted in temples modeled after Egyptian symbolism, with members dressed in color-coded robes corresponding to their rank. The initiations involved scripted dialogues, geometric movements, and invocations of archangels, all designed to align the initiate's inner being with cosmic order. Core rituals such as the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and middle pillar exercise trained practitioners to balance spiritual energies within the human body. The secrecy of its rites, enforced by solemn oaths, guarded esoteric knowledge believed to awaken latent powers and higher consciousness beyond ordinary human experience. Witch Sabbaths were secret nocturnal gatherings that European inquisitors believed witches attended to worship the devil and perform forbidden rites. Although much of their depiction came from confessions extracted under torture, descriptions remained consistent across regions. These rituals allegedly occurred on isolated mountaintops or forest clearings, where witches traveled by flight, often said to ride animals or broomsticks. Upon arrival, initiates renounced Christian faith, kissed the devil's form, and took oaths of allegiance. Feasts of spoiled food, rhythmic drumming, and orgiastic dances followed, symbolizing reversal of Christian morals. Some accounts mention mock sacraments, animal sacrifices, and transformation spells. While historical evidence of such Sabbaths is scarce, their mythology reflected deep social fears, female autonomy, folk medicine, and heretical knowledge. The Church used these tales to justify witch hunts from the 15th to 17th centuries, making the witch Sabbath one of history's most infamous examples of collective paranoia and ritual demonization. The Thuggee were a secret fraternity of ritual assassins active in India for centuries, particularly between the 14th and 19th centuries. They worshipped the goddess Kali, seeing themselves as her instruments of divine balance through the act of killing. Thuggee rituals began with offerings, prayers, and divination to determine if a target was approved by the goddess. Once chosen, the victim, often a traveler, was befriended, then strangled using a sacred cloth known as a rumal. This act was considered a religious duty, not murder, symbolizing the offering of a life to Kali to preserve cosmic order. The body was buried with ritual precision, and valuables were divided according to hierarchy within the band. Their killings followed strict rules, never shedding blood and never targeting women or beggars. British colonial authorities eventually eradicated the Thuggee cult in the 1800s, but their organized, ritualistic precision remains one of history's darkest examples of faith-driven homicide. Aztec human sacrifice was a central religious practice designed to sustain the gods and ensure the continued motion of the sun. Rooted in the belief that divine beings had once sacrificed themselves to create the world, the Aztecs considered human life a repayment of cosmic debt. Victims were often prisoners of war, chosen for their symbolic purity or physical perfection. The most dramatic rituals took place atop towering pyramids like the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan. There, priests dressed in jaguar or eagle costumes laid the victim on a stone altar, cut open the chest with an obsidian blade, and offered the still-beating heart to the god, most often Huitzilopochtli, the sun deity. The blood was believed to nourish the earth and sustain the heavens. Bodies were sometimes dismembered or rolled down the temple steps, symbolizing the descent of life into the underworld. These rituals, though horrifying by modern standards, reflected a cyclical worldview where sacrifice sustained creation itself. Mayan bloodletting rituals were sacred acts of devotion performed by nobles and priests to maintain balance between the mortal and divine realms. Unlike mass sacrifices, these rites focused on voluntary offering of one's own blood as a direct link to the gods. Both men and women participated, using obsidian blades, stingray spines, or sharpened bones to pierce their tongues, ears, or genitals. The spilled blood was collected on paper or cloth and then burned, with the rising smoke symbolizing communication with ancestral spirits. Bloodletting was performed during key calendar events, coronations, astronomical alignments, and agricultural ceremonies to ensure cosmic harmony and prosperity. Pain and blood loss induced trance states, believed to open portals between worlds where divine visions or messages could be received. Far from mere self-mutilation, these rituals expressed ultimate reverence, demonstrating that rulership and spirituality were inseparable in Mayan civilization. Necromantic resurrection rituals, practices intended to summon or reanimate the dead, appear in various ancient magical traditions, including Greco-Roman, Egyptian, and medieval grimoires. The goal was not always physical resurrection, but communication with the deceased to gain forbidden knowledge or prophetic insight. Practitioners performed these rites at night in graveyards or battlefields, places believed to hold spiritual residue. Ritual tools often included black candles, bones, and blood, used to bind the spirit to the magician's will. Texts like the Book of the Dead and Picatrix described complex invocations to chthonic deities such as Hecate or Anubis. A protective circle was drawn to contain summoned entities, as the act of disturbing the dead was thought to unleash unpredictable energies. In some versions, freshly killed animals or blood offerings were required to recharge the spirit. Necromancy's association with death, decay, and soul manipulation made it one of the most feared and forbidden branches of occult practice. The opening of the mouth ceremony was one of ancient Egypt's most sacred funerary rituals, designed to restore the senses and spiritual vitality of the deceased. Priests performed it on statues, mummies, or coffins, symbolically granting the ability to breathe, speak, see, and eat in the afterlife. The rite began with purification, washing, anointing, and dressing the mummy, followed by recitations from the Book of the Dead. The officiating priest, often wearing a jackal mask representing Anubis, touched the mouth and eyes of the deceased with ritual instruments such as the Pezeshkef blade or adze. Offerings of food, incense, and beer accompanied each invocation. The act replicated divine myths, specifically Horus reviving his father Osiris, ensuring eternal consciousness and communication with the gods. Beyond religion, it embodied Egyptian beliefs in continuity between life and death, where precise ritual actions maintained cosmic order and preserved the soul's journey through eternity. The Moonchild ritual was devised by Aleister Crowley in the early 20th century as part of his thelemic system of magic. Described in his 1917 novel Moonchild and Related Texts, the ritual sought to create a child infused with a pre-selected spiritual essence, rather than ordinary human consciousness. It combined ceremonial magic, astrology, and sexual rites under strict astrological timing. The woman, regarded as the vessel, was ritually purified and prepared through invocation of lunar deities like Artemis or Babylon. During the sexual act, the partners visualized divine energies entering the womb, aligning physical conception with metaphysical intent. The goal was to produce an incarnation of a higher being, a moonchild representing the next step in human spiritual evolution. Crowley insisted this was not symbolic but operative magic, fusing biology and willpower. The ritual's secrecy, erotic nature, and claim of manipulating life itself made it one of the most controversial in Western esotericism. The Order of Nine Angles, O.T.O, emerged in Britain during the late 20th century, combining occultism, nihilism, and extremist philosophy into what it called sinister tradition. Its ceremonies intentionally rejected moral and religious norms, seeking to accelerate human evolution through transgression and chaos. Core rituals included insight roles, in which initiates lived out taboo identities, criminal, political, or violent, to dissolve ego and embrace the dark gods believed to dwell beyond human perception. Ceremonies like the Sinister Eucharist or Ceremony of Recalling used blood offerings, symbolic sacrifice, and invocations of entities representing primal chaos. Unlike symbolic occult groups, O.T.O advocated real-world acts to manifest transformation, merging metaphysics with physical extremity. Its sevenfold initiation path required years of physical endurance, isolation, and ritual performance. Though often denounced for promoting harm, adherents viewed these practices as catalysts for transcending moral conditioning and attaining what they called post-human consciousness. The Ishtar Gate rituals were part of Babylon's grand religious system, honoring Ishtar, the goddess of love, war, and fertility. Taking place near the monumental blue-glazed Ishtar Gate, these ceremonies formed a bridge between the physical city and the divine realm. The rites involved processions of priests, musicians, and sacred statues during festivals like the O.T.O, New Year. Central to these events was the reenactment of Ishtar's descent into the underworld, a myth symbolizing death, renewal, and the fertility cycle. Participants carried ritual offerings of honey, wine, incense, and animal sacrifices to appease both Ishtar and her consort Tammuz. Temple prostitutes and priestesses, known as O.T.O, performed sacred sexuality rites to embody the goddess's dual aspects of love and destruction. These acts symbolized the merging of mortal and divine forces, ensuring prosperity for the kingdom. The Ishtar Gate rituals ultimately reflected Babylon's fusion of architecture, myth, and sacred performance in sustaining cosmic harmony.